Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to punish the bishop pin on the knight and the queen, that is, the bishop pin on g5. I'm absolutely sure this is a pin you come across in many of your games. Well, from today on, you'll actually want your opponent to play this pin against you, because you'll know how to punish it brutally. Normally, this pin happens in the Italian opening, although you can draw your own conclusions because it appears in many other openings, but the clearest example is in the Italian opening. For those who don't know what the Italian opening is, it's this right here, okay? These two moves, and that's it. Here, it'll work whether you play knight to f6 first or bishop to c5, because you'll end up in the same position anyway due to move order, okay? For example, bishop to c5, natural moves would be castling, right? Knight to f6 and then d3. This is a completely typical position in the Italian opening. If you play knight to f6 first, it would be the same, because after knight to f6, d3 is usually played to defend the pawn, and then you could continue with bishop to c5 and castle. Suddenly this pin is dangerous. Or remember well that if we castle first, this pin really is dangerous. However, if we don't castle, and for example play first, d6, a move we're going to make no matter what. This move is no longer so dangerous, and I'm going to explain why. First, we're going to push this pawn forward, because we're threatening this bishop. If it trades for the knight, we get a huge advantage, since it would go bishop takes knight, queen takes. The queen would be supporting the attack of this knight, and most likely, thanks to this attack, we would end up finishing the game. In other words, it wouldn't bother us at all if, after driving away this bishop with the move h6, it captured the knight on f6. So the most common move, and the one people always play against you, is this one here, right? But now, since we haven't castled, we can play g5 with a lot of strength. That is, here, why doesn't this work if we've already castled? Well, it's very simple. If here, instead of playing d6, we had already castled, then h6, bishop to h4 and g5 would be a mistake, because white could continue with h3, this knight sacrifice, and knight takes for two pawns with a lot of success, since now the king would be pretty exposed here and this knight could be attacked very strongly. So the big difference, pay close attention to what it is that now with d6 played, this doesn't work, and I'll explain why it doesn't work. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and now they're really not doing anything to us. On the contrary, they've sacrificed material to help us attack. We open the file for the rook. This bishop will have to move. This rook works together with the bishop, so we'll have a completely winning position. And on top of that, we'll be up material. If you want, you can castle long, and the position will be just as safe, but with a devastating attack and also with extra material. That said, let's see, this is very easy, chess teacher, if they've lost, or rather if they sacrifice the knight. But normally they're not going to sacrifice this knight. That is here. When we play d6 and they come over here, right? Pinning this knight, which is what we've been looking at so far, usually after this move, it's true they've allowed us to do this, but normally they won't capture. As you can see, it's a mistake. Normally, they'll retreat. Well, here I'm going to show you Chigorin's beautiful trap. Who is Chigorin? Well, he was a very strong player who came up with this trap, and honestly, it seems like it's already been forgotten. It's a beautiful trap. So what are we going to do? Well, simply, we're going to threaten to trap this bishop. This video is amazing, I promise you. Make sure to save it, because if you study it well, they'll never be able to pin this knight on you again. So if you like this kind of video, leave a big like. If we reach, pay attention, I'm going to ask for a lot, but since you all are the best in the world, maybe we'll make it. If we reach 300 likes, okay? If we get to 300 likes, I'll upload a video about how to punish the other knight pin, which is quite different, all right? But it's also dangerous. So if you like this video and we reach 300 likes, I promise to also upload the video about the other pin. All right, we push this pawn forward to set up the Chigorin trap. What's the threat? The threat is obvious, right? The threat is obvious. We want to push forward again and trap this bishop, right? However, there's a problem when playing this pawn advance, which is that we're hanging this pawn here. And most likely your opponent is going to fall for the Chigorin trap, since we're calmly threatening this advance. They might just take the pawn, thinking it's a blunder, and even believe they're completely winning. But before we continue, if they don't fall for this trap, the game will still be comfortable for us. That is, if they try to save this bishop, the game will still be comfortable because we have a very good position, a potential breakthrough here, and then we could push forward, open up with a rook, counsel long, bring the other rook over. So don't worry if when you play this Chigorin trap, they don't fall for it, all right? And you just play another move because it's very comfortable. However, I assure you that almost everyone who goes for the pin doesn't know all of this. I promise you. And they're going to capture this pawn for free. Why? Because on top of that, look at the huge threat they're making against the f7 square. Right? Now, it looks like white has an extra pawn and a crushing attack. However, we're going to ignore this attack and stick to our plan. h4. Come on, chess teacher, aren't you going a little crazy? You're threatening my bishop, but I'm coming at you. This move right here, they have to make it because it's already too late. It's just too late to try to save the bishop. This bishop can't go anywhere anymore, which is why they absolutely have to get into this game. They're threatening our queen and our rook. Now, you need to know one thing here. If you move the queen, that is, if you play queen to e7, the game becomes very comfortable for you. Yes, very comfortable for you. Even if they end up capturing your rook, the position is still quite favorable for black, all right? In fact, even if they capture your rook, you still capture this bishop, and black has the advantage. However, Chigorin's trap isn't that. Chigorin's trap isn't that. So what is Chigorin's trap? Letting him take the queen. And you're going to be amazed because it's incredible. It's absolutely impressive. We let him take the queen. Given that so much material has already been sacrificed, white has no choice but to capture the queen, obviously. It's true that white has a lot of extra material because they have a queen and 2 pawns in exchange for a bishop. It's clear they have a huge material advantage. However, our pieces are working together perfectly. We have the rook, the bishop, the knight, the other knight, and the other bishop. And on top of that, we have this powerful pawn up front that's going to let us win the game in several ways. Here, I assure you, you've already won the game. The only way white can avoid checkmate is by giving up all the material they've managed to win. And even then, we'd still have a much stronger attack. So we've won the game, and I'll explain how, because it's not complicated at all, and on top of that, it's really beautiful. We bring the bishop over here. Remember, when they capture your queen, you bring the bishop here. If someone didn't catch everything the first time, don't worry. The good thing about YouTube is that you can watch the video as many times as you need. There's absolutely no problem. I'm going to try to explain it so that everyone understands. We come in to threat the queen. Obviously, they could give up the queen, but that would be really bad for them, because if they give up the queen, we come in with the knight and keep attacking with all our pieces, and we wouldn't even be down in material. That's why the usual thing is for them to move the queen away. In fact, that's the best move in this position. Once they move the queen away, what move should we make? Well, many of you are probably thinking, take here with check, take here with check. Usually when we're down in material, what do we want? We want to attack quickly to deliver checkmate. Why? Because if not, the opponent, having more material, is going to beat us. In this case, that's not necessary. We can even bring more material into the attack. Knight to e4, the best move in this position. An incredible move that brings the missing piece into the attack. Now, what's the threat? You might be wondering. Well, simply, if white ignores everything and, for example, tries to move this knight to avoid losing it and threatens the rook, just to mention a move. If they don't address the threat, we simply go knight to e2, check, and when the king moves, checkmate. Do you see it? That is, here, when we give this check, the only thing they can do is give up the queen, right? So no matter what, they have to be careful with this move and respond to the threat. And here, they have several moves to deal with the threat. First of all, what happens if they capture the pawn? Because it's clear that this pawn is causing a lot of trouble here. What happens if they capture it with the 8th pawn? Don't worry, because this is very simple. We play knight to f3 check, and really the king can't move because the rook controls the file, so they have to capture it, and then we simply play bishop takes f3. No matter how many extra moves white has to capture the pawn, because now it's white's turn, there's no move that can defend against this checkmate on h1. That is, here, no matter what move white plays, we're simply going to deliver checkmate on the next move. So, in conclusion, they can't take this pawn, you see. They can't take this pawn with the h-pawn because then comes knight to f3, checkmate. Do you get? What happens if instead of capturing with the h-pawn, they try to take it with the f-pawn? So, are they saved, Chestiger? Well, no, they're not saved either because here we could checkmate in two different ways. Knight to f3 also works because it's a double check. They can't capture the knight because the bishop is also giving check, and when the king moves, we simply deliver this beautiful Arabian checkmate with the rook and the knight. Do you see it? So they can't capture with this pawn either. We could also checkmate on e2. It would be the same because it's a double checkmate, and then when the king moves, we will play knight takes g3, checkmate thanks to the pin from the rook. As you can see, there are so many beautiful combinations. So we've come to a conclusion. After knight to d4, they can't even ignore the threat, because then what would happen? Knight to e2 would come, king to h1, and rook takes h2, checkmate. If they try to capture this pawn with the h-pawn, we've seen that knight to f3 was mate. And if they capture it with the f-pawn, knight to f3 was also checkmate. And if you want it, also knight to e2, and then knight takes g3 was also checkmate. Very well, we're seeing here a lot of ways to save yourself. If, for example, they say, well, if you're going to checkmate me here because my king is trapped, what happens if I move the rook to give the king an escape route? Well, it's very simple. Knight to f3 did. Knight to f3 is going to be one of the most popular moves of all. If you do not take the knight, let us suppose you play, for example, king to f1. I could simply play pawn takes h2, and on the next move, I am going to checkmate you by promoting to a queen. Do you understand? I'm going to checkmate you by promoting to a queen. That's why after knight to f3, you have to take the knight. And when you take the knight, we would simply continue with bishop takes f3. And checkmate is imminent. There's no way to avoid the checkmate. For example, let's suppose you play, well, if you play this, I give you a direct nay, right? If you play, for example, pawn takes pawn, you can't. And if you play anything else, first I'm going to take here with the rook, and checkmate will be unstoppable. So another conclusion we've reached is that when we play knight to d4, moving the rook to try to let the king escape doesn't work either. Because simply, I'm going to checkmate you no matter what, again, right? So what happens if, for example, they play knight to c3? Makes a lot of sense, because that way you cover the knight e2 square. We've seen that if you played an unimportant move, I'd go knight to f2, right? And then after king to h1, the mate would simply follow. However, if I play knight to c3, knight to e2 is no longer possible because I would simply capture it. How should I continue, chess teacher, if they play knight to c3? Well, it's very interesting and at the same time quite logical. Knight to f3. As with most ideas, we play knight to f3. Thanks to the tremendous attack we have, if they don't take that knight, we simply deliver mate. Right? If they don't take this knight, we simply deliver mate. I know it's a lot of information, but I repeat, you can watch the video as many times as you need. I'm going to try to explain everything in a relatively short amount of time so that everyone can spend as much time as they need. I don't want to make this video an hour and a half long, you know? So if they don't take the knight, it's mate. If they do take the knight, then what is required to avoid mate? Well, simply, how would it continue? Just like before, bishop takes on f3, and as you can see, mate is unstoppable. They can't capture here because it would be mate. They can't capture here because it's pinned, and against any other move, I'm going to end up delivering mate. For example, now there's a threat of checkmate with the pawn on the next move. That is, against practically any move, it's checkmate with the pawn. As you can see, it's a brutal way to punish the bishop pin. I really hope you all loved it. If you like this kind of video, I put a lot of effort into them and deliver them to you almost daily for free. Leave me a big like, and if we reach 300 likes, which would make me really happy, then I'll show you how to punish the other pin. Hope you loved it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Let me know what you think. And as always, friends, I'll see you tomorrow with another new video. Bye, friends.